Hey everybody, Adam here from the Poisoner's Almanac podcast. I have a very special guest during this intro. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Camilla, and my last name is James, and I'm the daughter of my family, so I'm actually the only child in my family, and I'm glad I am.
Why are you glad?
Because I don't have to fight with other siblings.
Okay. This is all unscripted. She said she wanted to be part of the intro. So here she is, ladies and gentlemen, our daughter Camilla, 8 years old, and beautiful and intelligent, and we love her so much.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the episode. Welcome back to the Poisoner's Almanac podcast. I am your co-host, Adam.
And I'm Rebecca.
Rebecca, how are you today, my dear? What's new? What's kicking? What's happening, groovy chick?
Okay, don't do that. I am well. I got a lot done this weekend.
Okay.
Surprisingly so.
Tell us about that.
It was Mother's Day, and I made my mom this
Happy Mother's Day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I made my mom this little flower craft thing. She loves different kind of craft gifts and flowers, so I did that with my Cricut.
That's right. It's an amazing machine.
I do love it. So I did that, and I also got some laundry folded, which is very difficult for me to focus on. But I did it.
You guys need to understand the weight of what she's saying.
It normally takes me hours.
Right.
But I did it.
Heyo. Neurodivergent people, if you know, you know.
My child is fed, and well, she will be clean because she's taking a shower later. But
that's
I'm
right.
Getting there.
Let's not get greedy.
I'm getting there. We're getting there. Yes. But
that's right.
I'm even though there's like a holiday, which holidays are hard for me anyway because it's always this expectation of doing stuff socially.
Your face when you talk about that though.
I'm also like recovering from the field trip I went on with her.
Oh, you still haven't recovered.
I have been having a lot of forgetfulness because I'm exhausted from helping out on this one field trip, and that was like Wednesday, and it's Sunday, and I'm still recovering from that.
The social battery aspect
Oh my gosh.
of the neurodivergent life is real, y'all.
Yeah, and it was like out in nature, which I don't mind. I love plants, obviously, but the cicadas are very loud this year, and
yes, the 13-year cicadas.
It was very hot. It was like, it said like 88 degrees, but it was incredibly humid as well.
Yeah, so. It's just about to start getting hot down here in the deep south where we live.
And all the kids were sweaty and hot and smelly, and they were complaining. And
I will tell you, I had a Vietnam veteran as a patient this past week tell me the Vietnamese jungle was less humid than Georgia.
Really?
Actual words.
I don't know if I'd believe that. Really?
It was difficult for me to believe, but he insisted, and I'm just gonna go with it now. And now I hate everything.
You should have asked him about Agent Orange because we covered that last episode.
Oh, I'm sure we have. If we haven't already talked about it, we will.
Yeah, I've had some patients who were still dealing with issues related to Agent Orange.
Totally. Just in case anybody doesn't know, I'm a physical therapist. Becca is a registered nurse. So if we talk about medical things here and there, that's why.
I'm a registered nurse that's not currently working because I got incredibly burned out.
Incredibly burned out. Remember that neurodivergent thing we were talking about? The undiagnosed neurodivergence? It's super fun. You should try it.
Meltdowns in the bathroom.
That's right. Anyways, so today is Cyanide Part 2.
Yes, I'm going to do a little bit of review.
Okay.
And then we're going to get right into a few. We're going to talk about some.
I'm excited.
We're going to talk about cyanide and its use in cults and a few serial murders / suicides. Although when it comes to cults, I feel like it should be mass murder / suicide because you're basically brainwashed or making these people do this.
A case can be made.
Yeah.
Any district attorney will tell you.
It's pretty crazy what you can get kind of roped into, especially if you're vulnerable or in a state that these people prey on. So,
oh boy.
And we're going to talk about colts too, because colts are themselves a poison in many ways.
Oh,
so
getting deep.
And I'll explain that as we go, because it's a mental poison if you think about it.
We're getting metaphysical
because of how they operate.
Okay.
So just a review of cyanide and its different states and its effects on the body. We talked about hydrogen cyanide, which is a gas. It's gaseous form. It's been used in pesticides, explosives, steel engraving, making dyes, and nylon. We talked about sodium cyanide, which is a salt or solid version of it, used in the mining industry, especially with extracting gold. Potassium cyanide is another salt. And it has been used in mining, photography, electroplating, metal polishing, a lot of jewelry polishing, as well as polishing of pots, pans back in the day. Don't do that today. Not a good idea.
Right.
Now, cyanide in the body, like cyanide prevents ATP production. We talked about the mitochondria. Remember that little fun...
The powerhouse of the cell?
That little guy.
Okay.
And
all the millennials who had no idea how to do taxes giggle whenever I say that.
Gotta love that mitochondria. Now, like I said, it prevents ATP production. It severely depletes cellular energy and function. Cyanide also attaches to the hemoglobin, which carries oxygen in the red blood cells, which prevents red blood cells from absorbing oxygen and leads to basically asphyxiation from the inside out. If my words get funky and I have to repeat myself, I'm sorry.
Okay.
This is my brain on social
burnout.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm doing my best. Really am. Now, symptoms of acute cyanide poisoning include dizziness, headache, nausea, slow heart rate, loss of consciousness, convulsions, gasping for air, not fun, lung damage, respiratory failure, confusion, coma, and death. But it's usually so fast acting that death will usually occur before symptoms have time to show. So it's a pretty, and the gaseous form is probably the fastest mechanism it'll kill you fastest. Unless it's being introduced intravenously, which is less common, but...
Okay, yeah. Okay, I remember this now.
Yes. So we also discussed some history and folklore in the last episode. So if you're into that stuff, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. It's great. As well as the use of cyanide in chemical warfare. And I went over a few other chemical weapons while we were on the topic.
Yes.
So that's all in that episode. Now let's talk about cults.
Let's do.
So a lot of people know about cults, and there's different cults that when I say the word cult, I think would come up in someone's mind. There's some really popular ones out there, and I think there's like several cults in operation in America today. Like it's up there. Like the number is like 60, 70. It could be more than that now. But so, it's pretty up there.
I love this subject. Firstly, because I grew up in fundamentalist religion, and so I kind of relate way too much to like cult documentaries and people who escape cult situations and then tell their story on, podcasts and what have you. But I also had, speaking of patients I had a patient whose daughter was completely assimilated into a religious cult down further south, from about 3 hours south from us in Savannah. And the FBI knows about this group. They're called a church, they function as a church, but they have told this lady, because she reported everything that had happened with her daughter. They said, we know exactly who they are. We know what they're doing. Qualitatively, we know what they do, their tendencies and such. They have not crossed the line into illegal activity, but we got our eye on them.
Weren't there 2 churches here in Georgia recently that were raided, like in our area? I
think it was actually part of that group.
Really? Okay. Yeah, because I heard about that, but I didn't hear any more about it. So
right.
They basically got raided to make sure nothing, because they'd had a lot of reports about certain issues.
Yes, and it's such a terrible, terrible dynamic, because you cannot reach people who have bought in.
Well, yeah, it's the belief is so hardcore, and you honestly, I feel like we see that in certain areas of politics today too.
Oh, 100%.
So,
there's so many different.
You can
there's
have
so much
religious
overlap.
cults. You can have political cults. You can have all kinds of different cults.
When you
based on
lose
different things.
when you lose your own sense of personal identity, free will, original thought, it is extremely dangerous ground. Anyways.
Yeah.
Continue, please.
Well, I was wrong. Apparently, it's up to 10,000 cults still in existence today in the U.S.
Oh, God.
That's a lot.
Well, this has been a great episode. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Anyway, so that's a lot. That's a lot, actually. I wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought I was hitting high notes with like 60 and 70.
Wow.
No. So, definition of a cult. It's basically a religion regarded as unorthodox or spurious. I think that's the nice way of putting it.
You said spurious? Spurious?
Spurious.
What does that word mean?
It's like unorthodox, or it's
out of the norm.
Out of the norm, or it's on the verge of dangerous, I suppose.
Okay.
So there's also, it involves a great devotion to a person, idea, object, movement, or work, like a work of fiction, or Scientology, for instance.
Oh, okay.
If we're going to talk about anything, they like the guy that started Scientology. He was a writer, and he came up with all that stuff. I mean, if you look into the background of it, like he was a writer. They like to look into his fictional works as something else.
I'll be checking our mailbox for the cease and desist from the Church of Scientology.
I'm just using an example of work of fiction being involved in religion. Anyway, what they usually have in common. So you'll see a lot of authoritarian control, encouraging maximum dependency, like on this leadership. There's usually a very charismatic leader that people love to follow. And I feel like now there are some churches that are probably more orthodox in religion, that I feel like honestly are close to the line.
Oh, dude.
Of cults that I've probably
We read about
seen.
it every day on social media.
So,
it's terrifying.
You have to really be careful. Even if you go to certain places that seem like they're okay, you have to really look underneath and make sure you're in a safe place.
I think we have to raise our daughter with her own sense of identity. That's the main thing that comes to mind.
I'm not against religion, obviously.
No, of course not.
You have to be careful with what who you are giving over your time, money, all of that, because it can be dangerous. They have extremist beliefs, usually with the inability to question said beliefs without fear of punishment.
Yes.
So if you feel like you can't question the people who are telling you these things, they get angry, they get defensive, that's a red flag.
So many memories. Okay. Please continue. This is painful.
You should be allowed to have critical thinking skills and independent thought.
Oh, goodness.
You should be allowed to have that. That is, that's just something you should have.
Retweet.
Also, there's usually isolation from family and friends. They try to create this whole sort of hive mind, like the Borg.
Locutus.
You'll also see veneration or worship of a single individual, like the charismatic leader, or maybe even somebody the charismatic leader is claiming to be. So
let's say, I don't know, the Messiah.
That one is definitely a popular one. Oh. It's popular. So types of cults, you have your doomsday cults. Those are like your prepper based doomsday cults usually.
We're getting into it. I like it.
And some of these are like, we're actually gonna be talking about doomsday cults probably.
I'm so excited.
More than the rest.
Okay.
You have your political cults. 2024. Oh, man. You also have religious cults, of course. And I feel like these can overlap too. So
they certainly can. Well, they work better if they do, don't they?
Yeah. And also your sex cults, like the recent Nexium. Is it called? I think it's called Nexium, but it's like it's like Roman numeral looking.
Which isn't Nexium heartburn medication?
Well, it's like NXIVM, but I think it's pronounced Nexium.
Is it? Okay. They could have gone with
I don't know. Anyway.
They could have gone with
I could be, maybe I had a dream that told me that was pronounced Nexium, and I don't know. I have some wild dreams, y'all, but I think it is. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me because I don't remember.
Okay.
But they were definitely in that fourth category. Now, why does this matter? This matters because cults can be toxic, just like poisons are to the body. Cult can be toxic. Well, some of them use poisons. But the leader usually poisons their followers' minds. If you think about it, they're basically brainwashing these people to...
This is an intense metaphor.
Yes. So, and some end tragically with mass suicides via poisonous substances, like the one we're going to talk about today. So, the Doomsday Cult that we are discussing today ended with over 900 people dead by suicide. I guess you could say also it was basically mass homicide / suicide because they were made to do this via cyanide. So we're sticking with the subject of cyanide in this. And so we're going to talk about Jonestown, also known as the People's Temple Agricultural Project. Okay.
By the way, fun fact, Jim Jones, his son survived. He is alive today. He was there, but he survived.
Well, I've actually talked to a few people who had no idea who Jim Jones was recently.
That is frightening.
Did not know because this was a while back. What was this?
Oh, it's like the 70s? Late 70s?
70s. Yeah. So a little bit of history on Jim Jones, just because I feel like it'll give a bit of some context to how he was.
You're setting up why. You're setting up this whole situation, mass suicide by cyanide.
Yes, and I feel like if you know a little bit more about this guy, some of it might make a little more sense. So, Jim Jones and the People's Temple, as it became known. So he was born in a small town in Indiana, and his father was a disabled World War I veteran. Let's see, and he was also a member of, his father was a member of the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh, wow.
So already a lot of hate and stuff involved there. He was also said to be abusive, which, I mean, makes sense. He's into that kind of violent stuff. So, and his Jim Jones's mother was often seen as pretty absent, like just like there but not there, sort of. And Jim began attending church with the encouragement from some of his neighbors, but was seen by some as a very unusual child, who became obsessed with religion and death. And he was said to have begun preaching himself at 10 years old. Now, when I say unusual...
That's so strange.
When I say unusual, like he would visit a casket manufacturer in his town, and he would hold these mock funerals for roadkill that he would collect. Like... And
in the words of Elmo, when he's talking to Zoe about The Rock, what?
Yeah. He would also, there were some who said that he actually killed a cat with a knife at one of these funerals, for one of these funerals, I guess, to put on his own. I don't know. It's when you have people who are like hurting animals, that's a pretty big red flag for
red flag,
the future.
We act like there were no red flags sometimes.
Well, yeah, we just kind of don't talk about it, I guess. Yeah.
He killed a cat. Then held a funeral for it.
Don't fly these red flags at half-mast.
Oh, okay? Boy.
Let us see them.
Oh, that was deep, dear.
Okay, let us see them. Now, yeah, if he couldn't get any children to attend these funerals with him, he would perform the services alone.
Why?
Yeah, he would have people come.
I can't imagine this kid not having friends. Are you serious?
Yeah. He also claimed to have the ability to fly. And he once leaped off a building's roof to demonstrate his ability, but he fell and broke his arm because gravity wins. Nonetheless, he persisted in saying that he had these abilities, even though he fell. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lead-based paint? Question mark.
He would also put other children into life-threatening situations and tell them that he was guided by the angel of death. So there's that.
Oh dear.
He liked to commit pranks in church.
I thought you were going to say crimes.
Let's see. He claimed he stole the Pentecostal minister's Bible and covered the book of Acts with cow manure for some reason.
Just that book?
I guess. That's what it said. And he was like bragging about this for whatever reason. He also said that he substituted a cup of his own urine for holy water. Sounds like a boring childhood, but
dude,
here we go. So that was Jim's childhood.
Okay.
A lot of strange. Like I said, they said he was quite unusual. So
you don't say.
That was him. Now he would go on to create his own church in the 50s called Wings of Deliverance, which would later be renamed the People's Temple. Now, this church sounded great at first because it was known for its inclusiveness. It was fully integrated during a time when that was just rare. And
did any of these people know his dad was in the Klan?
I don't know.
So,
I mean, this is a time where you could have hidden that stuff pretty easily.
Totally. This isn't in Indiana. This is, what was it, San Francisco or LA?
This is in Indiana. They do move.
Oh,
eventually,
wow.
Yeah. I doubt they knew his dad that closely, though.
Wow.
Now, he was also a firm advocate for civil rights, and he adopted several children of various ethnicities. So, I mean, he seemed like this.
I'm so freaked out still, though.
He seemed like this great guy who just wanted inclusion.
He's just playing a part.
Yeah. However, he was also a big fan of Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, and is it Mao Zedong? Is that his name? How you say his name? Mao Zedong? He was like a Chinese ruler at one point. His political beliefs were on the Marxist communist side.
Well, yeah.
But he was also very evangelical. He loved showy demonstrations. Mm-hmm. And he and temple members would actually knowingly fake healings because he soon realized that these services could increase faith and finances, which he said could be used to help the poor. But of course, he was using a lot of that money. They would even use chicken livers and other animal parts to show that cancerous tissues are being removed.
Oh, God.
Yeah, like they would like literally just pull them out. And he would, here's a red flag, he would also call himself Father. And his followers were his children or his darlings.
Massive red flag.
Yeah.
And I can think of 2 or 3 churches or movements right now that do that exact thing.
Yeah.
And it freaks me out.
Now, he seemed to, just letting you know, he preyed upon minorities, the poor, the uneducated, anyone who felt like they had no voice.
Of course.
Felt like they had a voice here because he seemed like he was doing good work for like civil rights and stuff. Uh-huh. I say seemed. Because, yeah.
He's manipulating their sense of anger or displacement in the world.
Right. Like he's sort of twisting the view of justice, I think, too. Mm-hmm. Now, he quickly developed this idea of, if you're not with me, you're against me, which would fuel his paranoia later on. Mm-hmm. Now, he did move the church to California in 1965 after claiming that he had a dream that a nuclear holocaust was coming, as if like California would be safer than where they were if a nuclear holocaust was coming.
That doesn't even make practical sense.
No, it doesn't. So around 150 followers went with him. Now, through services and recruitment drives, they would have these recruitment drives where they'd go out and like just convince people to come. They would literally like have a bus that went out and like take people out there to go recruit members.
That's intense.
Yeah. They but through these drives and such, they grew to 3,000 to 5,000 members very quickly.
Not attendees, members.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was, I'm assuming there was membership in this church.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna.
Is that how you mean that, or like is that attendance?
People that were coming regularly.
Okay, attendees.
Yeah. So
gotcha.
Like members, I mean, like they're following his teaching, basically.
Oh, okay.
Now, there would be some who would go on to leave. They would actually be labeled as traitors and seen with very...
Shun the non-believer.
Yeah, seen as like, seen in a very hateful way. I'll get to that, though. So Actually, I'm going to get to that right now. Many members began to fear leaving, as those who did were named as traitors or defectors. There were also rumors of Jones using drugs and becoming increasingly paranoid. So this is where he starts losing it. Oh, he'd already lost it. Let's be honest.
He never had it.
Yeah. This is where things start to get even worse. Now, there's a lot more detail to this story, too. I'm just hitting a lot of the highlights. So I'm sure you can find all kinds of documentaries, books on this.
I've seen one. It was very informative.
Because it was a very big deal. Now, after some bad press...
You're kidding.
Jones decided they needed to move somewhere more isolated. And bad press, I mean, like, there were allegations of abuse coming his way, things being published...
Yes.
That sort of way. And like, the news. So he was like, we got to get away from this because this might fall apart if I stay here.
I can't protect the movement in this geographical location anymore.
There's no social media either at this time. So there's no like warning like, hey guys, this guy is crazy. I feel like things like this could be stopped a little quicker.
They can't. You would think that because of the rapid exchange of information that cults would be far less prevalent.
Well, then you have like
one would think,
but then like you have what happened with like the QAnon stuff,
dude. I mean, it's still going on.
Would that be more of a political cult? I guess.
Certainly. And there's also religion mixed in.
Right. They probably wouldn't consider themselves that.
Oh, of course not.
But like if I'm just putting it together in my own mind. That's what it seems like to me. Yes. I don't know that much about it, to be honest. I know. Right. Living in the South, I've heard probably a lot more than I wanted to. But
that's right.
Anyway. Yeah. So after some bad press, like I said, he decided they needed to move somewhere more isolated. Another red flag. They tried to isolate you from the rest of society.
From anyone who could object.
So in 1974, he leased nearly 4,000 acres of land from the government of Guyana. And there's a lot going on in this deal. You can look it up. He basically got these people to trust him, and they were like, oh, this will be great for us. We'll have all these people come. And like they have migration, like, or immigration, like standards and stuff there. But like he was able to talk them into letting his whole crew come at once and all this stuff. He got around the red tape, that kind of thing.
Right. He basically got 1,000 people to move to a different country.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
Yeah. I don't even want to go to the grocery store. So I don't know how anybody had the motivation to do this, but here we are. So yeah, the government. So Guyana is in South America. Basically, the jungle of South America is where they were going to.
Yep.
Now, at first, around 500 came to build homes and a clinic and a school. Like they were basically going to build this place up from scratch.
This is Jonestown, right?
Yes. So it was going to be free of any outside influence.
Well, can't have that.
And Jones was claiming it would be a socialist utopia for his followers. And they believed it because, this sounds great. If they're thinking that this Holocaust is coming and the government is against them, they can get away and provide for each other and love each other. They're thinking like, yeah, utopia. But as we know, it's not really a thing because humans, people. Anyway, in 1977, with the building pressure of media investigations looking into abuse allegations, Jones and several hundred more followers made the mass migration to Jonestown. Life became heavily controlled after that. Now you kind of have to be a member at this point because you're not going to go anywhere else. These members were working 6 days a week from 6:30 a.m. to 6 o'clock p.m. And Jones proudly compared their schedule to that of like North Korea's schedule of workers. Because, yeah.
It just keeps getting better.
Yeah. Now, this would change a little bit later to 5 days a week at 8 hours per day because Jones' health started to deteriorate and his wife became kind of head of some things. I don't know. That his health was deteriorating probably because of all the drugs he was taking.
Probably the drug use.
Okay. And his mental health, I imagine, was on the brink. And he was making his followers attend classes on Soviet alliances, socialism, revolution, and about their enemies, quote unquote.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and they were
Literally,
made to watch this. So it's like you go there thinking you're going to be in this utopian, everybody's free sort of thing. But no, you're just in a place where somebody's making you watch this stuff now. And I don't know. So they were only allowed to watch Soviet propaganda and documentaries that had been screened and approved by Jim Jones in his drug-induced stupor.
A gentleman and a scholar.
He would punish anybody not interested. Punishments for this and other quote-unquote offenses included imprisonment in a 6x4 by 3 foot wooden box. He would also force children to sleep at the bottom of a well.
Okay.
Sometimes upside down.
Okay.
Also, there were beatings. And those who attempted escape would be forcefully given drugs such as Thorazine, Demerol, and Valium. And there would be armed guards patrolling the area night and day in case someone tried to escape or... Not very utopian-like. Yeah. Now, let's see. Children were surrendered to communal care and barely saw their own parents.
Oh, they do that in Scientology.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Okay. Yeah.
Wow. Adults and children were made to call Jones father or dad. Mm-hmm. Ew. What's a dad? Sorry. There was also a nursery where 33 infants were born. So there's people being born into this.
Babe, I cannot imagine.
Terrible. So yeah. So for a while, the commune was actually run on members' Social Security checks and welfare checks. Yeah. It was apparently built on poor soil, so a lot of commodities had to be imported in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so,
I can't see him scouting the soil beforehand.
No, he's not going to know it. He doesn't know how to do any of this.
Yeah.
I mean, he told people he could fly. Okay? He's pulling out chicken livers from his pocket.
Ain't that little Jimmy Jones who said he could fly and jumped off the roof? Is that the same? Is that him?
He's pulling out like chicken livers and saying, I cured your cancer. And conning people left and right.
Mercy.
Yeah, so a lot of the meals that they ate consisted of rice, beans, some greens. Every now and then they might get meat or eggs. Mm-hmm. Although Jim Jones was allowed to have more than they were.
Of course.
Of course. They did have some medical problems like you would in a forest deep in South America with no health care.
1,000
whatsoever.
people? Yes.
So we're talking like severe fever, severe diarrhea, things like that, you know.
Yes.
Lots of issues.
They're drinking the water?
Yeah, I doubt they're drinking clean water, so it's probably a lot of that.
Jeez, man.
I mean, they have wells. There's no telling what's in those wells.
Nope.
Now, Jones began to tell his followers that their enemies in the American government were conspiring to destroy them and their settlement, and he put on these things called White Nights, where he would test his followers' loyalty by telling them it was the end and their enemies had come. On one occasion, he even made them drink something that he claimed was deadly poison. It turned out that time to be a test. He basically told them you'll be dead in 40 minutes.
It was a trial run?
Yeah. He didn't tell them it was a trial. He just told them to drink it.
That is psychotic.
He told them to drink it, yeah. One of these drills lasted for 6 days.
Okay.
Yeah. He regularly studied Hitler, like I mentioned before, and somebody called Father Divine. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
I had to look him up.
Okay.
Father Divine was big around the Great Depression. He was a religious cult leader who viewed himself as the messenger and later as Jesus Christ reborn.
What do you know?
Yeah,
He's back. I'm him.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Aren't I lucky?
It's crazy. You need to be a little more original.
If it works, it works, I tell you.
Like, come up with something like, Scientology has their alien dude, right?
I think so.
What was his name? Whatever. Xenu.
I think.
Xenu.
Xanax.
Oh,
I can't remember.
Oh, Lord. Anyway, yeah, he was considered a part of something called the New Thought movement, which is basically a bunch of like positive thought BS. Like, okay. If you think it, it will happen to you. I hope that's not true because a lot of my thoughts are these like intrusive, terrible thoughts.
I love how he called it. This is during the Great Depression. The New Thought movement. Everybody's like, I need a new job movement. That's what I need.
Like if I think about it hard enough, it will happen to me, which is another thing. Like I think
It sounds just like
that still
manifestation, word of faith
that
movement,
still
name
exists.
it, claim it.
That still exists today.
Sure.
Also, what is it? Law of attraction. There are people who believe it's similar, I think. Maybe not the exact same, but similar. So there's different, and believe what you're going to believe. Totally up to you.
Sure.
I'm a big fan.
Live your life.
Yeah, I'm a big fan, and you believe whatever you want to believe. And I don't, believe in shoving things down people's throats or anything like that. But, definitely live your life. But don't, live like Jim Jones and, lure 900 people to a jungle and do all this. Don't do that. Now,
Don't say you can fly. Stop it. Get some help.
This Father Divine dude also founded the International Peace Mission movement. There's a lot of these words.
Why is it always called something like that?
Yeah, peace. Come to this peaceful utopia land of whatever. Also, I'm Jesus, and so it's
Your wife belongs to me.
Yeah.
Anyways, lunch is at 12.
A lot of red flags that go missed because they're but it says peace, right? So be careful out there, y'all. He was a staunch capitalist, but also admired communism. He was allies with.
Now that's a drug user.
Or maybe he was getting money. I don't know. Anyway, so this was the guy that he really admired too. So
okay.
Birds of a feather, I guess. Now, at this point, Jim Jones' drug habit was really bad. He was said to be abusing Valium, Quaaludes, stimulants, and barbiturates.
Good Lord.
And after his death, an autopsy would reveal that his daily drug intake would have killed anyone who was not used to it.
They did an autopsy on him?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
They
were able to collect. Okay, we're going to get there.
Okay.
Okay, now for this next section, I do want to put a trigger warning because it gets pretty awful, pretty dark. There's going to be, we know how it ends. There's mass suicide, homicide, whatever you want to label it. I would probably label it he's at fault here for killing these people. But it also includes children, so I would label that as definitely abuse and murder. So trigger warning for that. Now, in the final days, there were horrible stories reaching America about Jonestown, for good reason.
Right.
And by late 1978, California Congressman Leo Ryan had heard enough from concerned relatives of members that he had decided to go see it for himself and bring anyone back who wanted to come.
Yeah.
He went along with some press and some concerned family. There was quite a few on this trip with him to kind of feel it out. Now, he was the only one allowed in at first. They wouldn't let any of the press or anything like that in at first. They let him in. And the members gave him a tour, and it was pretty obvious how bad Jones was getting when it came to his drug use and his paranoia. When the Congressman Ryan offered protective transport back to the States with him, it said about 15 to 20 members-ish left with him for the airstrip and the awaiting plane that was there.
Yeah.
Well, they were followed on Jones's orders. He snapped, I guess, because his illusion of control was now being ripped away from him. And they were ambushed. And Congressman Ryan, 3 members of the press, and one of the defectors were killed by gunmen. Meanwhile, back at the commune, Jim Jones summoned his other followers and announced that it was time for their revolutionary suicide. He had been having cyanide imported over months, claiming to be a jeweler who needed it for polishing. I told you they used it to polish things like that.
Right.
And he'd been having it come in for months. He was, I think he was planning this eventually anyway. Now, they had vats of fruit juice that was mixed and laced with cyanide and Valium. And many of them took the drink willingly. They'd already had one trial run, I guess. There were also parents who gave it to their children via syringes.
Yeah, it's unconscionable.
It's awful, yeah. Some were found with gunshot wounds, as there were armed guards who were basically ordered to kill those who refused.
Oh, wow.
So, and there were a handful of survivors, including a young boy that they found the next day in the forest. He was found by Guyanese police when they arrived the next day, because they were like, okay, something went down. Something went down at the airstrip, and of course they're gonna, be like, what the heck?
The police found a child by himself in the woods who had survived.
There were a couple other survivors. There was one old lady who was sleeping and didn't hear the call to come to the thing.
Unbelievable.
And she survived. There was a few others, but now, of course, Jim Jones, he died by shooting himself in the head.
Yeah.
He didn't even take his own poison. He just shot himself. A total of 918 people were killed. And these events were the greatest single loss of American civilian life in a deliberate act before 9/11.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Now, there is something called the death tape. After the deaths, a tape over 44 minutes long was found with audio footage of the last moments of this whole ordeal.
Oh, God.
And
I did not know that.
Yeah. In that tape, you can actually hear Jones telling them to, quote unquote, die with a degree of dignity. Lay down your life with dignity. Don't lay down with tears and agony. He also said, I tell you, I don't care how many screams you hear. I don't care how many anguished cries. Death is 1,000,000 times preferable to 10 more days of this life. If you knew what was ahead of you, you'd be glad to be stepping over tonight.
Wow.
So pretty messed up. Yeah. Now, there were also notes that they found from loyal members who were basically trying to leave their money and possessions to the USSR. Like they had.
Oh
they
my
were
God.
so bought into his message that
Yes.
this was what they needed to do. They felt like, and I think they even had somebody who was from the USSR come and speak to them. Like he was able to get somebody to come and I don't know. It was
Unbelievable.
weird. There's all this stuff online and in documentaries that you can look at. There are other details involving a murder-suicide that took place in Georgetown. Is it Guyana? I keep saying Guyana. Is that right?
Yes.
Or is it Guyana?
Guyana.
Yeah. Where they had, it's like I hear it in my head, but I can't get it out of my mouth.
Okay.
Where they had offices or an HQ. Jones basically radioed for the few there to commit his quote-unquote revolutionary suicide. And the one woman there basically killed her 3 children before killing herself. So it was not just there. It was wherever his members were that had
terrible.
happened. And you can actually, if you have a weak stomach, I don't recommend doing this, but there are pictures of the site after the fact.
I've seen them
online.
It's awful.
Yeah, it's pretty awful.
Because
an aerial view of
the
aftermath.
The footage, when a corpse lies on the ground in the elements for several days or however long it was before they actually filmed it, it becomes grotesque.
Well, they found them the next day.
Was it the next day?
The Guineas police found them the next day, and then they were able to turn the bodies over to America.
Identify them. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of them were cremated.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway.
It's horrible.
There's a whole process that they went through to do all that. Mm-hmm. And there are also, like I said, a lot of documentaries out there. There's even more details involving surviving members, some good, some bad. I know you mentioned his son survived, but in 1984, there was a former member, Tyrone Mitchell, who fired on an LA elementary school, killing 2 and injuring 12 before taking his own life. He was a former member that survived.
Oh.
So it just goes to show you that, he survived, but his mental health was probably...
Lord. There's no...
Yeah.
There's no telling.
Yeah. So that's just one of many cult stories that used either poison or mass homicide, suicide. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's other ones you could talk about, like the Solar Temple. There was a mass murder / suicide there. Mm-hmm. Back in the 90s. Heaven's Gate.
I remember Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate. They didn't use cyanide. They used phenobarbital and applesauce or pudding.
I remember.
Followed by vodka.
Oh, okay. Chase it with some vodka.
Yeah. They also placed bags over their heads.
Well, that'll nail that.
They were, yeah.
The footage of the leader of the Heaven's Gate crowd.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk about a creepy...
What's his name? Applegate? Marshall Apple...
Is it?
Marshall...
Gates in his name? That's a trip.
It's Apple something.
Applesauce?
No, no, not, it's something
Marshall
like that.
Applesauce Gate. Heaven.
He looks.
He looks like a cult leader.
Yeah, he was another one that basically theirs was into like theirs was a mix of Christianity, New Age, and UFO extraterrestrial cosmology stuff because they had but in that one I think like 39 died and they that was the cult that they wore the Nikes. They all wore the Nikes and they said they were going to get on the ship following the Hale-Bopp.
Yes,
Comet,
I remember the comet being involved.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And these are, I guess, close to home, but there are other ones too. There's quite a few in India that I've read about, cults. There's the Barari deaths that happened in 2018. This was an Indian family with shared psychosis. There's like a documentary, I think, somewhere that I watched on this too.
Okay.
You ever heard of Osho? You ever see like things on like Facebook where it's like these quotes and it's by a guy named Osho and it's like super spiritual or whatever? You ever seen those? Guy with a beard. It's kind of weird looking.
Maybe I did. I don't remember.
People still share these and I'm like, isn't that cult leader? I was like, I don't think they know that it was.
Okay.
But his name was I think it's Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh.
Okay.
They moved from India to Oregon. They had this whole commune out there. There was
You say Oregon?
Yeah.
Wow.
They moved out to Oregon. There's a thing called something in the wild. There's another documentary about this whole thing. Mm-hmm. But they basically planned to poison the water supply. Some of his people did because
poison the city's water supply.
They were worried they were going to get voted to disband, I guess.
Required to disband by the local government.
And so what they wanted to do was like they wanted to make everyone who wasn't them sick so that they couldn't vote on this thing. So they decided like we're going to have a trial run. They like poisoned 10 salad bars at 10 different restaurants with salmonella and like 700 people got sick.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then they were planning to poison the water supply like after that, but they got like caught. They weren't able to do that.
Jesus.
One of his quote unquote disciples burned down the county planning office. And there was also a plan to assassinate an attorney that was investigating them. So
cool.
He ended up moving back to India before he could get in trouble, but he changed his name to Osho. And so anytime you see one of those like cute little, and
then he got a Facebook account.
Well, he didn't, but people started like even celebrities were sharing his like quotes and stuff because they seem super spiritual. But like anyway, so yeah, if you ever see those little encouraging quotes by Osho, that's who that is. Now I want to talk real quick about one other thing. I want to talk about the Tylenol. Wow, I am tired. The Chicago Tylenol murders. Because this is not a cult thing unless they went in the wrong direction with the investigation. Okay. But it does involve cyanide and a mass killing using cyanide. Okay. And also why we have certain anti-tampering things on our medications today.
Like on the cap of the bottle, like you have to push down and turn it?
That's for like child safety. Oh. I'm talking about like covering seals.
Oh, right. To make sure it hasn't been contaminated or something.
Now, the Chicago Tylenol murders involved at least 7 deaths, and it's still unsolved. Okay. Now, this starts in 1982. 12-year-old Mary Kellerman was hospitalized September 28th of that year, 1982, after consuming a capsule of extra-strength Tylenol. She died the following day. Okay, strange because Tylenol, you think it's very you
have to take a lot of it. Yeah, you have to take a lot of it to get to toxic.
And even then, it's like you usually survive. You may have a bad liver, but they can usually get you to live. 6 others, Adam Janus, 27, Stanley Janus, 25, and Teresa Janus, 20, took Tylenol from one bottle that was in the household. And there was Mary McFarland, 31, Paula Prince, 35, and Mary Reiner, 27. They took Tylenol from separate bottles These people don't know each other. They would also die from taking extra strength Tylenol. Now, upon investigation of what could have caused the deaths in the victims' homes, there was a nurse named Helen Jensen. She was basically the only public health official at that time in this area.
Okay.
And she found a Tylenol bottle at the Janus home that had been bought the day of their onset of symptoms, according to the receipt that she also found. And there were pills missing. So she gave it to the investigator on the case. And the medical examiner involved asked him to smell the bottle, as he suspected cyanide was the cause of the deaths. And the bottle, sure enough, smelled like almonds. So we know where this is going.
Uh-oh.
Now, testing was done on the remaining pills, and 4 out of the ones remaining contained almost 3 times the fatal amount of cyanide. So obviously, it was advised that people not take any Tylenol until this was worked out. And Johnson & Johnson, you know, the company, stopped Tylenol production and ads, and also issued warnings to places like hospitals and things like that. It was also found that the bottle that the Januses had, and the bottle that Mary Kellerman had taken from, were from the same lot. So they had the same lot numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And a recall was issued for that lot. But bottles from different lots were also found to be tainted. So like the other victims' bottles were from different lots.
Right. So they can't nail it down to just that.
Thus, the recall was extended to all bottles of extra-strength Tylenol, you know, just to be safe, in Chicago.
Yep. And
it was one of the biggest drug recalls ever.
Yeah.
So even
Tylenol
customs...
is a common medication.
It is very much so. It's supposed to be a very safe medication, as long as you don't overdose on it.
Sure.
Even customs agents at airports outside the U.S. were asking if visitors brought Tylenol, because no one knew what was going on.
Wow.
Now, another bottle of Tylenol was found during the recall that had been tainted with cyanide, but the woman who purchased it noticed that it smelled funny and she didn't take any. Lucky her.
Ooh. Girl.
More were also found on store shelves. These bottles had been made in Texas and Pennsylvania before being shipped to Chicago, and since the deaths had only occurred in Chicago, it could be deduced that the bottles of Tylenol had been tampered with after arriving to certain stores and before being purchased. So someone was opening bottles of extra-strength Tylenol, putting capsules with potassium cyanide into them, and putting them back on the shelves.
That's nuts, dude.
And back then, there was no, like, tamper-proofing. No. There wasn't, like, the stuff that you could, the seals and stuff that you could just open it, look at the pills, and there you go. Which I feel like that is an odd level of trust to me. I just can't imagine.
Well, it's like the deal with horrible crimes committed on school campuses. In the last 20, 30 years, it's
I feel like we're Americans though. Like I don't trust schools either anymore. We had did you not have? When I was in high school at Richmond, we had, walking in, you had to go through metal detectors, and they checked all of our bags. They checked our thermoses. They checked our lunch bags before going in. We had to sit and wait.
But that's post Columbine.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so many of these things happened on high school, public school campus, all school campuses, because of these heinous things that have been done. But before those things happened, we just could not. It would be unconscionable to think that another student would bring a weapon onto a campus. Like, that's, like you talk about, it's a weird level of trust. It makes sense. Like, but at the same time, like, who out here is thinking, I'm just going to put some cyanide in Tylenol? I've had it.
Because people are the worst.
Yes, that's true. But you get what I'm saying. It's like the culture of criminals, so to speak.
I don't know that I do get what you're saying, because I've always been distrusting.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
We would literally get searched at our high school.
I know you would, but again,
we had dogs come through every other week to look for drugs in the lockers.
Yeah, but you grew up in a fairly rough county.
Yeah, but
it was rough over there. But even so, it's escalated. Nobody would dare. Even the worst of us would not conceive of hurting an elementary aged child. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It seems so sinister that you couldn't even. It's like you're making a Horcrux. How could you split your soul? You know what I mean?
This is all for academic purposes, isn't it, Tom?
Right, Tom?
Okay.
How does one make a Horcrux?
Oh, dear. Of course. Anyway.
Of course.
So, yeah. So it had to be going on in the area itself. Now, local police and FBI were involved, as well as the FDA eventually, with the investigation, which involved viewing surveillance footage, which apparently wasn't great at this time, There was DNA testing on the bottles and fingerprints. But my thing, too, is like, you don't know how many people have been like touching these bottles, picking it up, looking at it, putting them back,
It's a needle in a stack of needles.
Yeah, it feels
a
lot. They even tried to lure the killer by releasing the address of the youngest victim, Kellerman, with her family's consent, of course, thinking like there are killers who like to go back to the scenes of crimes. It gives them some weird satisfaction to return to these scenes. And I don't get it. Now later, James William Lewis was accused of trying to blackmail Johnson & Johnson by demanding $1 million to stop the poisoning. It sounded like, if he was doing it. He would later confess to writing that letter. My later sounds like letter. He would later confess to writing that letter, but denied actually committing the poisoning or tampering of the Tylenol. He and his wife submitted DNA and fingerprints, which did not match that on the bottles. He would be convicted of extortion and sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Did he do this?
He swears he didn't, and there's no evidence that shows he did. But he did
it.
I think he just tried to get money off of it. So he basically was just trying to blackmail them for money, but there's no actual evidence that he actually did it. He died in 2023. It's not even that long ago, at 76.
Okay.
Another suspect at the time was Roger Arnold. He frequented a bar owned by a man named Marty Sinclair, who told police that he had bragged about killing people with a white powder and said he had become more and more erratic after his marriage. My God, I can't talk. Marriage fell apart. I'm so tired. Mellage.
Melancholy.
There were some coincidences between Arnold and the deaths. He had worked with one of the victims, Mary Reiner's father, and Arnold's wife had once been treated at a hospital across from the store where Mary had bought the cyanide-laced Tylenol from that she had. He also had a book in his home with instructions on how to make potassium cyanide. But while interrogated several times, he was never charged, as there wasn't like enough evidence to really link him to it either. Yeah. So he was charged in 1983, however, after shooting and killing a man that he mistook for Marty Sinclair, the one that accused him.
Say what?
Outside his bar.
Oh, okay.
And in 1984, he was sentenced for second-degree murder, but only served 15 out of his 30 years. After his death, his DNA was compared to that on the bottles, but no match was found. But then again, like, there's also gloves. Like, I feel like people could be using gloves, too. So you just don't know,
Wow.
We just don't really know for sure. Now, the investigation was renewed after 25 years had gone by, and in 2011, the FBI actually requested DNA samples from Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber.
No.
His crimes occurred between 1978 and 1980, and his parents had a home in Chicago in 1982 where he sometimes stayed. But that's all the information I have on that. So.
Oh, wow. What a rabbit hole.
Right. Now, the Tylenol murders of 1982 have never been solved, but they did inspire the development of seals, like I said, and other tamper-resistant packaging.
Yeah.
So also many over-the-counter medications were changed from capsule form into tablets because, they're just sitting on the shelves. They're not going through the hands of a pharmacist. And believe it or not, there were actually quite a few copycat murders with this. So it's not only one insane jerk doing this. There were, let's see. Actually, it was immediately after this. There in 1986, there were 3 more deaths that occurred from gelatin capsules. Also in New York, 23-year-old Diane Elsroth died after ingesting extra-strength Tylenols laced with cyanide. Let's see. Excedrin capsules in Washington State were tampered with, resulting in the deaths of Susan Snow and Bruce Nichol from cyanide poisoning. But that did end in an arrest with Bruce Nichol's wife, Stella Nichol, for her intentional actions in the crimes. So it's almost like she saw that happen and she was like, well, hell, I'll just poison some Excedrin and give it to my husband whom I hate. And,
who I hate.
And maybe I can blame it on what happened there. In the same year, Encaprin, made by Procter & Gamble, was recalled after a spiking hoax in Chicago and Detroit that resulted in a precipitous sales drop. So it's almost like calling in a bomb threat. You're calling it a cyanide threat, I guess. 1991 in Washington State, Kathleen Denneker and Stanley McWhorter were killed from 2 cyanide-tainted boxes of Sudafed. Jennifer's husband, Joseph Mayling, was convicted on numerous charges. After that, 1986, University of Texas student Kenneth Ferries was found dead in his apartment after succumbing to cyanide poisoning. And tampered Anacin caplets were determined to be the source, but they eventually ended up, after ruling it a homicide and looking into it, they eventually ruled it a suicide. Strange way to die by suicide, but I don't know. Maybe there's something else there that they just didn't see. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was the Chicago Tylenol murders. Unfortunately, there were copycats because some people are just twisted like that. Mm-hmm. And if you want more cases of cyanide, look into Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman. He claimed he had ties to the mafia and liked killing people with a cyanide spray, and he had something to do with Jimmy Hoffa or whatever. But there's a lot of dispute between people on that. He did go to prison for killing at least 5 people, but he was also Yiya Morano was a woman I read about. She literally conned her neighbors and her cousin out of money, basically saying to invest in her. There's actually a musical about this woman. It's called Yiya the Musical. Right. And she basically just apparently poisoned some cakes and some tea and just murdered the heck out of them.
Wow.
And she went to prison, but there was an issue where I guess a law was passed where people only had to serve 2/3 of their sentence or something like that. And so she actually was released in 1997 after only 16 years at the age of 68. She apparently sent judges who got her out boxes of chocolate, which I hope they didn't eat.
Oh, no.
She's known as the poisoner of Montserrat. She actually became something of a celebrity after her release, though. She appeared on TV programs, and there were
She killed people.
She was the subject of TV programs. She had her own musical. She would go on to go to a nursing home and die in a nursing home in 2014. So 2 more interesting cases after that, but you can totally look those up. I haven't seen the musical. Let me know if it's any good. I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of cyanide cases out there, and those are just some of the ones that I thought were interesting to bring.
I guess you could say that musical kills.
It slaps in a deathly way. Deadly way. Anyway, but next week I'm thinking about doing maybe some animal poisons.
Oh.
And then go back to doing some plant-based poisons just to kind of get a little palate cleanser from all the crime and cults and craziness. I mean,
Amazing. All right. Thank you guys for listening. That's it for this episode. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.